Let's talk about characteristics of forecast. First of all, forecasts are always inaccurate. It doesn't matter if you're forecasting for next day, next week, next month, next year, you are forecasting a variable in the future. Future is uncertain, so therefore we don't know for sure what's going to happen. Forecasts are always inaccurate. Long-term forecasts are less accurate. If you are throwing a party for next week, it's much more easier to know what to do. If you are having a party, throwing a party for next year, it's much more difficult to know what to expect. Same for businesses. Short-term forecasts are much more easier and more accurate compared to long-term ones. Aggregate forecasts are more accurate. So in the example of snacks, let's say that there is a business producing chips in different flavors. Customers walk in to purchase a flavor. If there isn't, if the shelf is empty for that flavor, that's okay. Usually customers go purchase another flavor. So that's why businesses use this and aggregate demand forecasting instead of for every single flavor. They do demand forecasting for the category of flavors. And therefore, aggregation can help to cancel out these random noise at the item level. And then we have to consider bullwhip effect when we are working on demand forecasting. And what does it mean? It means that for example, retail stores, which are downstream in the supply chain, are very close to the customers. They can see the trends, they can see how customers are doing, customer behavior, and those kind of things. So usually, demand forecast that retail stores are doing much more accurate and reliable. As we move upstream to distributors, to manufacturers, to raw material suppliers, they are far away from the customers. They have less information about the market. And therefore, if we are sharing the information of the market with them, eventually things are get lost. Specifically, if we don't have effective IT management system to share this information. Let's say that if retail stores doing their own demand forecasting, manufacturers are doing their own demand forecasting, suppliers are doing their own demand forecasting. So there will be problem and mismatch of the things that they are doing. Say that there is World Cup matches, and suddenly people are consuming, more snacks. So they have to retail stores know actually this. They see the trend. But let's say that if raw material suppliers are not paying attention to this specific event, they might assume that, hey, demand is going up and people are purchasing more of these products. So let me increase my inventory for next year. But that shouldn't be the case because this event is a short-term event and later demand will fall down after this World Cup event, right? So again, we should be very careful. It's much more effective if there is a central unit that does demand forecasting and shares all the information with everyone in the supply chain. So there are some factors going to affect demand forecasting. These are just a few of them. I'm sure that there are many more that you can think of. First of all, it is important to consider past demand when we are doing demand forecasting. And not sales because customers might walk into the store or even purchase online and don't find the product available. So it is actually a lost sales for the business. So when they are doing demand forecasting, they should consider that for the future forecasts. Lead time of the product replenishment also matters. If it takes 1 month to fill the shelves of that product, so the business should do demand forecasting for a few months ahead. If it takes like convenience stores that take a week to replenish a product, so they might consider demand forecasting for a few weeks rather than months. It is very important to consider planned advertisement, marketing effort, also price reduction when we are doing demand forecasting. Because promotions, price reductions, these can suddenly increase demand. If this information is not being shared with other parties in the supply chain, they might assume that, hey, people are interested in our products and let's increase the production constantly. But after that promotion is ended, then they cannot sell the products anymore. So this kind of information should be shared with everyone in the supply chain and should be considered when doing demand forecasting. The state of the economy is also affecting demand forecasting. For example, if unemployment rate is going up, gonna affect customer behavior and eventually the demand for different products. And also competitors' actions. If competitors are introducing new features in the product or introducing new technology or changing the price, that will directly affect the market, customer behavior, and therefore demand out there for the business. Today, I also want to talk about methods of forecasting. So there are a variety of methods, and not necessarily we can say one is better than the other, depending on availability of the data and uh, the complexity of data, we might decide to go with any of these. We can think of maybe three categories. Qualitative methods are when we don't have access to the historical data. Maybe we are launching a product for the first time. We can use these techniques. Quantitative statistical methods usually are used when we have historical data on the product, and also they are usually more stable. For example, consider detergent. So, detergent demand is the same throughout the years. And usually trends, patterns are stable, so statistical methods can do very well on those kind of products. Machine learning AI models are these days are being used by tech companies usually with a large scale data, big data availability, and also usually complex data. So many features to be considered, so many factors to be considered when they're doing demand forecasting, and these techniques are doing well in that case. So, qualitative methods are focused on human judgment. So, if we don't have data to rely on, we need people who are expert in the field to help us. So, usually, when there is a new launch of a product, or post disruption environment, for example, after COVID, things were different. So, how we know if it is post COVID, if things are getting back to normal or not, we don't really know. That was the first time such a thing happened. So, again, these kind of techniques can be very helpful in those kind of situations. Some techniques under qualitative methods. Delphi method is where we invite experts into forming a panel, talking about different things that can affect demand, and then meeting several times to conclude what demand can look like for this new product or new situation. Salesforce Composite is another way. For example, sales team can go and get pieces of information that can be integrated into the big picture, showing us what can happen in the market. It can be specific events that are happening. It can be customer behaviors out there. Can be competitors' work. Can be the economy, how it is doing, and then we get all the pieces bottom up, meaning that starting with the pieces and then integrate to see the big picture. And then market research. Obviously, this is the best way to figure out, reach out to potential customers and also have some focus groups, releasing the product before to this focus group before releasing it to the public, and then let them test and tell us their feedback. Apple did similar thing back in 2015 when it was releasing their first ever Apple Watch. So there was no historical data on this product. This was the first launch, and therefore they used uh, experts to help them figure out how the demand gonna look like. And also they did customer research as well to figure out if customers are interested in such products. And it helped them to actually realize the units of production for this specific product. So there are statistical methods out there that can be used for demand forecasting. I'm sure that if you search for statistical models, you can find a lot of information out there. I don't want to go into details for this lecture since this is just an introductory lecture, but I would be happy to provide more information in case you're interested. Feel free to reach out to me. An important part of demand forecasting is to know if there is seasonality in our um, data or not. So let's say that ice cream. Ice cream has seasonality. People usually tend to purchase ice cream in summer more than winter. So when ice cream providers are doing demand forecasting, they should consider this seasonality. And also trends. Specifically these days, social media affects trends tremendously. So companies are actually using social media data all the time to figure out which products are actually people are interested and should be offered through the business and so on. So these kind of trends also are important when it comes to demand forecasting. There are many retail stores that are doing actually demand forecasting considering seasonality. For example, during Christmas time, there is a huge demand since people are purchasing gifts. So companies do consider these kind of seasonalities. If there is a specific products that are becoming trend for Christmas gifts, they should consider that as well, and they are doing considering that so that they have more accurate, close to accurate demand forecasting for that specific season of the year. And then last category is machine learning AI models for demand forecasting. Sometimes it happens that we have maybe hundreds of variables that are needed to be considered in demand forecasting, and therefore the relationship among these variables are very complex actually, and we need much more effective approaches to do demand forecasting. There are different machine learning models that are currently being used by companies. Again, I'm not going into details of this. If you're interested, reach out to me. I would be happy to provide further information. But just letting you know that these days, actually, new techniques are becoming available, enabling companies for fast-paced demand forecasting. For example, Amazon uses machine learning AI models to do demand forecasting. They ship products to customer close to the customer locations before they even place their order. So Amazon constantly using customer behavioral data on their website, all the clicks, all the saves, all the purchases to figure out what each customer likes and dislikes, and then forecast their future demand even on the individual product level to ship those products to the warehouses close to the customers for future, assuming that customers going to purchase them. So let them be close to them, and Amazon can offer short delivery times, a day or a few days to deliver to the customers. And then why we are doing all this demand forecasting using all these methods? Because it is the first step to make supply chain decisions. So in order to put this into perspective, I want to briefly talk about sales and operations planning, S&OP process. So basically, if you look at this picture, it actually shows what happens, right? So there are some input information to S&OP process. Demand forecast is the most important one. We use that information for demand management. So meaning that if we need to provide promotions or manage the demand, increase demand, manipulate demand, or decrease demand because we are just starting, we don't have enough inventory, we are just balancing the demand, right? So all this information gonna go into the demand management system. And demand management system will directly be fed into S&OP. S&OP goals is to balance supply and demand, making sure that we have enough supply to have happy customers. And to do that, we need to decide about production level, how many units of products to produce, what's the capacity needed in each center, even daily schedule of production will be defined, resources needed, how many facilities, how many people, how many machineries, how many raw materials, how many inventory centers, distribution centers, how many shipments are needed, even how many vans, trucks, airplanes we need for all those shipments, and so on and so forth will be decided based on this S&OP operations. And remember that the main input to S&OP is demand management information. So again, we are doing all this because we want to make a lot of decisions, long-term, mid-term, and short-term decisions in the supply chain. The first step is to go through demand forecasting and then feed that information into the entire supply chain. I have a few questions for you to think about things that you learned so far in this lecture. Please pause the video, check the questions, and then you can find the answers to the questions in the next slide. First, a new streaming service is launching. Which qualitative forecasting techniques is most appropriate and why? So since it is new, there is no historical data, but what should we do then? Next question, true or false? An aggregate forecast for a product family is typically less accurate than an SKU level forecast. Explain your answer. Is it true? Is it false? And why? Third question, a retailer notices that actual sales of a product were lower than forecasted demand. What are two possible reasons why past sales data alone may have underestimated true demand, and which factor from the demand forecast framework explains this? Please think about it. Think about the answers, and you can find them in the next slide.